A few days ago, Trump suddenly announced that more than 800 generals stationed around the world should return to the United States for an emergency meeting. In American history, there's never been such a large scale military meeting before. The schedule was extremely urgent, and the generals didn't even know the content of the meeting. With such a major move, was the United States going to launch a significant military operation globally? However, that was not the case. Trump simply told the generals, "I love you all, and everyone must stay united. When I need you, you must gather quickly and respond to my orders urgently." Did he go to all this trouble just to say these things? Of course, the matter is far from that simple. Immediately after the meeting, Trump suddenly instructed the Department of War to dispatch all necessary troops to protect the U.S. city of Portland. From this, we can see that Trump has been constantly testing the boundaries of the U.S. president's power. He wants to concentrate military power to the maximum extent possible. Many people believe that the U.S. president is the most powerful person in the world. This statement is both correct and incorrect, because there has always been an implicit understanding within the United States that implicitly assumes itself to be the global hegemon. The greater responsibility of the U.S. president is to maintain this global hegemony. Moreover, most of the U.S. military is stationed overseas. As the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, the U.S. president holds absolute command authority. However, his focus is more on managing overseas affairs rather than domestic ones. The U.S. military carries out military missions overseas, not on U.S. soil. There is a crucial logic here under the Posse Comitatus Act enacted by the U.S. in 1878. There are clear provisions stating that active duty U.S. military personnel are prohibited from participating in domestic law enforcement activities such as arrests, searches, and patrols. This act is designed to restrict the president's power, preventing the president from deploying troops to crack down on opposition groups and ensuring that the U.S. military is used to maintain U.S. hegemony rather than for internal partisan struggles. Therefore, if Trump takes a dislike to Iran, he can deploy B-2 bombers to carry out bombings there at any time, but he cannot deploy troops to perform missions on U.S. domestic territory, let alone use them for partisan struggles. In the 147 years since 1878, no U.S. president has broken this convention. At this point, some people may wonder, then who is responsible for public security on U.S. soil? In fact, this falls under the purview of the National Guard. The governor of each U.S. state serves as the commander-in-chief and primary responsible person of the National Guard, which is tasked with ensuring the security of each state. In other words, the underlying logic of the U.S. system is that there is no hierarchical relationship between the U.S. president and the governors of each state. The president is elected through a national election, while governors are elected by each state. The U.S. president manages global affairs and governors manage the affairs of their respective states. Each side performs its own duties without interfering in the other's business. To put it simply, the U.S. president is responsible for foreign affairs, and governors are responsible for domestic affairs within their states. But when it comes to Trump, the logic has completely changed. He now intends to thoroughly alter the current state of U.S. power. Ever since he returned to the White House this time, he has been constantly testing, trying to figure out just how far the president's authority extends, especially his military authority over the U.S. homeland. If a governor displeases him, he wants to directly dispatch U.S. troops to carry out missions in various states, even to suppress opposition groups. Back in June this year, Trump wanted to crack down on illegal immigrants in California, which sparked protests among California residents. This kind of incident is usually commonplace in the U.S., not even worthy of being a major news story. Unexpectedly, Trump bypassed the California governor, directly deployed the National Guard for operations in the state. And that wasn't all. Trump went a step further, planning to mobilize 700 active duty U.S. Marines stationed at Camp Pendleton in California, meaning he wanted regular U.S. military forces to participate in the operation. When this happened, California Governor Newsom was stunned. It was completely beyond his comprehension. First, the governor of each state serves as the commander-in-chief of the National Guard and is the top commanding officer. Second, U.S. troops have always operated overseas and never participated in domestic military deployments, something that has almost never happened in the U.S. He was sidelined without even understanding what was going on. In the end, Trump claimed that the U.S. had entered a national emergency and that the situation in California was out of control. Citing this reason, he invoked Section 12,406 of Title 10 of the U.S. Code, declaring that the unrest in California was interfering with federal law enforcement and constituted an insurrection. In such a state, he has the authority to deploy the National Guard and even regular U.S. military forces to suppress unrest in various U.S. states. Through this operation, Trump has made a highly successful attempt. He has broken a U.S. tradition of over a century by deploying the U.S. military on domestic soil. We can imagine that in the years to come under Trump, the U.S. could enter a national emergency at any time. Whenever Trump takes a dislike to someone, he will bypass Congress and the courts to act on his own. Ultimately, he wants the U.S. military to fully obey his orders and carry out a comprehensive reshuffle of power within the United States. There are many underlying reasons for Trump's actions. Before 2016, the U.S. had been mired in intense partisan struggles for over a century, but at the very least, these struggles were gentlemen's contests on the surface. The two sides would hurl insults at each other. Yet once the overall situation was decided and a president was elected, the losing side, no matter how unwilling, would still show a certain degree of grace, offering congratulations to the winner. Once a president was elected, there would be no political persecution, no purges, and no dredging up of past grievances. But when Trump arrived, this logic was completely upended. He resorted to all manner of retaliatory tactics. Currently, Trump's most terrifying memories stem from the 2020 time when he was truly tormented. The Democratic Party used every means to destroy him. He was swamped with one lawsuit after another, constantly either heading to court or on his way there, not to mention the FBI's raid on his Mar-a-Lago estate, which was nothing short of a nightmare for Trump. Now, all Trump thinks about is how to ensure he can retire safely in 4 years without facing post-retirement purges. Therefore, what he must do now is uproot the remaining elements of the Democratic Party, guarantee his own safe laying after retiring in 2029, and ensure the continuation of his political legacy. The most effective way to achieve this is to use the military to consolidate his power and overwhelm Democratic-controlled states. In Trump's version 1.0, he was completely unable to control the military. A typical example: before the results of the 2020 election were finalized, Nancy Pelosi persuaded the military, essentially sidelining Trump. But in his version 2.0, Trump has clearly matured. On one hand, he wielded the big stick he had Elon Musk conducted to intimidate the military, claiming that the Pentagon had never passed an audit in decades. On the other hand, he kept handing out candy. He announced a series of new plans, such as the development of the Jinkwang system and the research and development of artificial intelligence platforms. He pushed one major project after another, vowing to increase investment in the U.S. military industry and military budget to let the military minus industrial complex profit. It is now clear that the Pentagon has reached an agreement with Trump and once Musk completed his historical mission, he was immediately kicked out of Trump's team. Thus, Trump has already completed his first step, verifying the military's loyalty. The recent gathering of all U.S. military generals is just another test by Trump. He wants to ensure that when he needs to deploy them, they will obey his orders 100%.